at the beginning of my career, I was introduced to sustainability as a must do because design is to solve a problem. People say, you make what sells. If, as an artist and as a designer, if you're at the mercy of what the audience is able to think, imagine, and ask for, then you're not really being creative.
I love the idea of taking students through the learning process right from like step one till use or post-consumer use of a particular product.
I think looking at a soil to soil curriculum, as we call it, the experience is what I felt needs to be as deep as possible, as enriching as possible. I think it continues to be part of the experience of the designer or the artist. How the product is impacting the life or everyday experience of the person who's using it. And when they decide that they've had enough or they've used it enough and they discard it, what happens to it? If it's going to sit there for 250 years, you're directly responsible for it.
I mean, if you take them through that whole process and how long it takes and slowly go through each of those situations, you're bound to connect with that product. You're bound to connect with the processes involved in creating that product. That's so beautiful.
Academics is at a major crossroad. It will either evolve into something new because it's become redundant. What's been taught for decades today doesn't make sense in the battlefield. And I call it the battlefield because you look at the world around right now, it's a very sorry state of affairs.
On the one side, we have to kind of adapt to technology and use technology well, but also keep true to our traditions and, ancient wisdom.
You become aware and then you make the right choice. You don't make a choice first like I did. And eventually I found out that, this is the most ugly side of fashion.
Welcome back to the Kiwi podcast. I'm your host, Nidhi Murthy, and today I'm joined by Sukraj Singh, founder of Indenium School of Responsible Design. With over 20 years of experience in denim and indigo, Sukraj has built a practice rooted in slow fashion, rejecting fast trends in favor of thoughtful design and deep process. At Indenium, he is reimagining fashion education by guiding students through the entire life cycle of a garment, from spinning of the yarn to weaving fabric, dyeing, and garment construction, believing that true understanding comes from experience. It's this immersive, hands-on approach that shapes more conscious, impactful designers. This conversation is a powerful outlook into how fashion can be both forward-thinking and deeply responsible. Now let's get into the episode. So thank you so much, Sukraj, for joining us today. I'm very excited to get into this conversation about education in the fashion industry and the idea of changing it to become more responsible, mindful, and conscious in terms of education, especially in the fashion industry, is something that we desperately need. But before we get into the details of it all, I'd love to hear, where did this begin? Where did your journey begin with Indenium, and what was your inspiration behind it?
Thank you, Nimi, for having me with you on this special podcast. I'm a fan of the work you're doing. And I would like to start with the journey of my childhood, I think, because it all starts way early for all of us. What we seek in life, our aspirations, it all begins when we are probably early school, in our lives. So for me, being raised in a defense background and having changed multiple schools, it was great as an exposure of cultures, of landscapes, and obviously growing very close to nature in the army cantonments in small towns. So it was very, very, what do you say? It attached me very close to cultures and travel and, different sides of nature, the character of landscapes from places to places, and got me very fascinated by all these things. And I did originally want to join the forces, but that somehow took a backseat when I had fine arts with me towards the end of my school, and I was doing really well. I loved to draw since I was a kid. So fashion just happened with a little bit of friction, of course, of ideas back home, that it wasn't a very popular career back then when we started. I'm talking 1999, 2000. Is when I actually went to study fashion, and it was it was difficult for me to even relate at the fashion school, because all I saw was bridal wear, all I saw was red carpet, and a lot of even ethnic, as they called it. That's a word that I would strongly not recommend anymore to use for clothing. But it was a little difficult for me to find my place at the fashion school while studying. I loved to draw and sketch. Yes, that kept me going. I was good at constructing garments as well. But the focus for me always was, the interest in functionality, utility, something more everyday, wearable, that the clothes we were wearing every day, no one was talking about them. And I felt that actually occupies the largest chunk of the market, where sales driven and production driven numbers will be very, very high. And it was something also that I felt, put people together as communities through a way of expression. So I was interested in something that I was not able to find. Music happened coincidentally, formed a band, was very inspired by punk and grunge movements, to pick up an
Oh, wow.
instrument and start writing. And those years when you're feeling like you're a rebel, you're looking for your cause. And rock music helped a lot. And through rock music came the love for denim. And I was like, I really want to do denim. I was not able to find much inputs at the school I went to. I went to NIFT, and I felt that I was told also that I'm sort of on my own, seeking what I'm seeking. And I was fortunate to have somebody at Irvin Mills in, the denim division look at my work and say that, okay, I find it interesting how you're connecting social aspect of, youth or people in general, and connecting it to denim as a lifestyle, because that's where we would need this. And I found myself getting my first job at Irving Mills Denim Division back in Ahmedabad. And I felt that while I was there in a new cosmos of, a fashion career beginning, I didn't really know much about denim. I had just, loved the jeans I wore, the jackets, and the whole, the graphic aspect of the work and the branding. But about making of the textile, I knew nothing. So I was very honest there as well. And they said that, okay, let's work on your strengths for the early time. You can do graphics, you can do campaign, you can do exhibition design. You can also learn under the mentors. Like we had Italian and Japanese designers who were working on fabric ranges. I had them as mentors, was very, very lucky to learn under such very senior and experienced people who've been working on sustainability since the 1980s.
Yeah.
So in my beginning, at the beginning of my career, I was introduced to sustainability as a must do, because design is to solve a problem. Design is not to create more problems. And being such a vast universe of products, the denim chain, the supply chain, when you look at it from cotton farming to indigo, all the way down to the conversion into a fabric, which is stood the test of time, the weave and the color. When you look at it, the conversions, the ideas that then transform from that fabric into a final product, the infinities that people are exploring over the decades. We've seen denim become so essential across the globe. That's such a strong product, and I knew that it's going to take a long time to learn all the stages of this, and I was ready to commit, because I loved the whole aspect that there was something different about this, and I think being set on that path early on um, only brought me closer and closer to the harsher realities of fashion, as I worked with e-commerce as my last corporate engagement, over my formal experience by that time of about 11 years. Having worked with great denim mills and having created products with a lot of conscious effort, the e-commerce side of things was a little bizarre. something I could not again relate to. I felt myself at that same crossroads while I was at fashion school, that where am I going ahead from here? I do
Mm-hmm.
not certainly see myself becoming a part of this, just make, and make it cheap, sell it fast. Uh, you know, I think that the whole ideology did not align with me. That after having spent a decade in design, learning and exploring, what would I like to do? I would like to do something very value added, not take the value off from a product. So I kind of, at that crossroad, was guided again by my mentors, my godfathers in the industry, that what you're seeking probably it doesn't exist. And at
Mm.
that time, I'm talking about 2014, it didn't exist, because everywhere I consulted, everywhere I did design as a freelancer, it always clashed at the ideology stage, where the
Mm.
only purpose is the singularity of commerce. It has to sell. And what about creating something new? So I've always had this, like the film industry magic formula people talk about come in as a metaphor here, that people say, you make what sells.
Mm.
So, if as an artist and as a designer, if you're at the mercy of what the audience is able to think, imagine, and ask for, then you're not really being creative. You're not really you living up to the responsibility of what you're supposed to be doing, offering great creative products that solve problems, right? So that
So
clash.
why not create products and start a line? Why did you go into the education side of things instead of like starting your own brand and creating product?
I wanted to start my brand, and I started working on that as well, because I wanted to fuse my passions in life all into one. So that, the first thing I think, when you seek since a child, is what would you like to do, is something that you would enjoy. So what is it that I enjoy? I enjoy rock music. I enjoy motorcycling. Can I put them into work together? And I started to think of this as making denim gear, riding gear with protected armors and everything inside it, so that it's like a technical product. It's functional. It serves a certain purpose, and yet
Mm-hmm.
it is something that is made in denim, because I saw that the riders market was flooded with leather and synthetic products. And in our kind of climate at home here in India, where we experience a short winter, or you want to experience winter, you have to head up into the Himalayas. This product was completely missing. I was in Delhi. I wanted to ride, and I had nothing that I could wear in the scorching 45 degrees, still be comfortable and happy about motorcycling in that traffic. And I found there was a need, and so I had this idea I started working on. But you have this aching feeling inside. Once you discover something, you want to find like-minded people. You want to even show certain things to certain people, that this is what the reality is of something that we're all aspiring for blindedly, or
Yeah.
maybe with false idols. So I wanted to do something also where I was engaging with people, and I was again guided. This sort of an divine intervention happened, that one of the people from the denim industry I had made earliest of my career's presentations to had shifted from being the Asia head of Levi's to a design school, and I said, "What are you
Oh.
doing there?" So yeah, and she called me and she said, "A lot of people here are talking about too much glamour, glamour. Can we look at some, technical knowledge as well? Can we introduce some denim?" I said, "Wow, sounds fantastic." So I did that for about a couple of years. I started engaging with various design schools, taking this 1 week denim workshop, talking about sustainability, and I don't think it hit the right notes at the time, because people didn't know why bother about waste, because it wasn't as evident, it wasn't as much
When was
spoken
that?
about. I'm talking about
What year?
2014.
Mm.
So I did eventually. I remember even going to the landfills around Delhi and taking pictures, just to show people that, look, what lies in those landfills is essentially packaging and clothing.
Yeah.
And we're creating mountains of this garbage around our city. And that was also the time when I was starting to get a little, uncomfortable living in a city the size of Delhi NCR. So I felt that sharing about this is something that's key to the work that I'm going to be able to do, along with something that I'm passionate about. So I started doing this, but I realized that this 1 week workshop in a 4 year program for an individual was too short a time to have that spark and have it be nurtured. Then I also
Yeah.
looked at the void that when we look at design academics, it's not being spoken about as much as it should be. The denim and the fast fashion categories. We need to address the elephant in the room. The one that's most polluting in the whole of fashion industry is denim for its processes, right from cotton
Yeah.
farming, right to the dyeing practices, and then all the way to this additional special feature, which at a certain point in my time in my career, I used to post about that. I enjoy vintage clothing and I love the washing aspect of denim. But you add so much more chemicals, you're using so much of water extensively to finish a product, make it look like a certain aesthetic. I think all of this needed to be brought to the classroom,
Hmm.
and people needed to know that if you're willingly going to do this, making thousands and thousands of garments on a daily basis without really thinking about the larger picture.
Yeah.
So I think academics was a great way to engage with people while also learn about and refine my own mission, that why am I doing what I'm doing, because morally I'm not at peace in a corporate job earning a great salary and not being bothered about the world because I don't have the time
Yeah.
to think. So having the time to think was, I think, the biggest privilege of starting this journey of entrepreneurship. And the label took the back seat because the academics kept getting more engaging and stronger. I wrote a curriculum eventually, which was presented to the best of the design schools to be incorporated into their 4 year programs. Could be an elective or could be a specialization. But sustainability and the talk about responsible design was not understood. Maybe it really made me think that is it right even to start working in this direction. Nobody acknowledges it and nobody wants to even work around it.
So that was something I was heading into, actually, is understanding what, like, before we get into your specific school, um, the the idea of having it in the curriculum of bigger fashion schools, because I feel like we can just reach a lot more students in that way and educate more people in that way. So
Yeah.
what was their response like in terms of accepting a curriculum like this? Were they not, was it because they didn't feel the importance of sustainable design within the curriculum, or is it because of the demand from young designers?
I would say there are two sides to this. One is the students or the learning enthusiastic people who want to explore this category because it was never talked about in the curriculums of 4 year long study of design. So
Yeah.
on the student side, I would see a lot of excitement. People would get thrilled about, because when I'm talking about subcultures and rock music, dominating the whole social scene and how that's connected to a product, it excited people that, wow, here is something. We're not only talking about pattern making and construction, sewing, we are also looking at how the product emotionally is
Yeah.
connected to an audience. And that was a great thing for me as well to see that, wow, okay, I'm this sort of a journey that I've had as a musician, come falling in love with denim as work for me. It does resonate with a lot of people, but like I said, those 5 days were quite small to nurture that, and it was just more like an introduction. And when I would reconnect with any of those students, I would hear that they would hit the same dead wall, like I did. That the schools don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the machinery, they don't have the mentorship to guide these students further on that journey. So you're very right
Mhm.
that engaging with other design schools could amplify the impact, at least excite more people, and how many ever may choose to take this path, at least will take it in their full awareness. So
Yeah.
that is one side, and the other is the think tanks of the design schools. within the schools, where I think, as you said, sustainability was not valued. It wasn't an emergency. It wasn't a critical scenario where the work you're doing is being questioned, like it is being questioned today in 2025. You know, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you produce at the scales you're producing? How are the people who are working for you being treated and being paid for? What social responsibilities are you, taking under your organization? And what are you really doing? What is the goodness of your work, other than the
Yeah.
profits that may be, the defining thing for you? But I think we needed to question the larger, spheres of work, and that didn't really align with most design schools at that point in time. Today, maybe they're all trying desperately to figure something or the other out, and I keep still, hearing from friends in the circles that academics is at a major crossroad. It will either evolve into something new because it's become redundant. What's been
Yeah.
taught for decades today doesn't make sense in the battlefield. And I call it the battlefield because you look at the world around right now, it's a very sorry state of affairs. If you're
Yeah.
single mindedly working towards, there's enough being said about this if people watch movies and, the right kind of movies. Or if they listen to the right kind of music, enough being spoken about and shown that these choices that we've made in the recent past and are still making are going to destroy the future. It's as
Yes.
simple as that. So, in an apocalyptic scenario, there should be some ray of hope. So, and I was looking for that ray of hope. That where can we bring in some positivity and a little change in mindset that we need to, really look at the way we do things, and we're simply
Yeah. So tell us.
consuming.
Yeah. So tell us about the school and what your intention is with it, and just kind of an overall structure of what the curriculum kind of looks like, just so we're
I'm
able
sorry.
to even understand what the idea of understanding responsible design is and what that actually means.
No, I think it aligned very well with me when I looked at my mentors, people I learned from in the industry, whether it was about indigo, whether it was about denim, whether it was about the special washes and finishes, that everywhere there was a value system that was at play before the
Mm.
technicalities of the operations, how you execute design. There was a value system. There were core values that said, keep it simple. This is what Stefano, one of my gurus, used to tell me. Like, whenever you look at a process, whenever you're trying to design something new, keep it simple. You
Yeah.
know, if you keep it simple, it's going to have less complications and less manipulations required on the fabric or on the product to arrive at a certain outcome. Keep it simple, and that stayed with me like magic. I've had a very dear teacher back in design school, Yunus Kimani, who's become a very dear friend over time. He's a practicing artist, and he used to say that there has to be something more than your bread and butter values when you're looking at a long
Mm.
time career. You should not only be looking at your bread and butter values. What are the other core values? What are the moral values with which you approach work? Are you here
Mm.
to make things beautiful, or are you here to make things terrible? And if that awareness is there, I think a lot of people would look at the work far more responsibly. So the word responsible design came to me while I was, while I decided that, okay, if none of these schools are encouraging, we've got to start on our own. So me and my wife Vijaya, my mentors Yunus Khimani, Vipul Mahadevia, they all came in together saying, "We are here with you. Just go ahead." And I was like, "How do you start a design school?" And so we realized that there was a lot of things we're going to look at differently at the value system part. We've got to go away from what we say is, or what we acknowledge as, is the hub of the problem. So we've got to get out of the city. It can't be placed in a city. So we moved to the Himalayas because I felt that bringing people here, giving them that exposure to nature, that proximity, that also the remoteness sometimes. So we take them all the way to Ladakh and Kutch. That that remoteness instills certain things inside an individual that otherwise have been lying dormant. and they
Yeah.
tend to pay attention. And we are here at the borderline, based in Dharamshala, of excessive consumeristic lifestyles and dense civilization, and on the other side, absolute remoteness and pure nature. So once you're at that borderline, you're able to look on either side and say, hey, okay, I choose this, or
Yeah.
whatever you choose, you make a conscious choice. So responsible design was a word I thought about because also it has that a lot of my love for comics, superheroes. Batman has played a major part in my life, inspiring. So I thought that the word responsible needed to be brought into this picture.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you do, you've got to be responsible for it because you're offering people something. It's not something you're doing, in your own la la land and in your own
I love
fantasy
that.
you live in. You're
Yeah.
involving people in making something you choose to sketch, and you're involving people who will use that product and are going to be impacted by what it does to them. So you have to be
Yeah.
responsible. So responsible. The word became very very important while coining the name, and Indenium itself came out of India, indigo, and denim coming together. For me, I felt that, like I said, in design academics, I found this complete huge void. Why is nobody talking about indigo? It's
Mm.
fundamentally the starting point of our revolution, independence struggle. It's the
Yeah.
stage which is not to be ignored. It was set back in the past, but it connects us so strongly to our culture, to our colonial exploitation, to the revolution of denim itself. It's not a Western concept, I say always. The origins and the sources and the resources all came from this motherland here. Whether it is the
Yeah.
birth of the fabric or it is the indigo that revolutionized the uniforms and then the social clothing. I think it all starts on this homeland. We've got to pay closer attention to what we had that we are losing. What is it that the way it was done? We need to look back because we're living in a time of shortcuts. We're living in a time of pressing a button or speaking a command and getting things done. We've forgotten to do things. So to do became very important as in the curriculum, and we felt that let it be an open school, let it be a hybrid format, because when people learn from their own space, when you're at home, you're at most comfortable a space where you can think whatever you want. And to
Yeah.
think is the first step. You've got to be able to take in and ponder over things. And
Yeah.
when you're ready with some questions, or when you're ready with some motivation to go ahead and look at problems up close, we travel. And we do these
Mm.
very long road trips, from destination to destination, which I think introduces a lot of fun element as well as a lot of seriousness, because you're cruising through the problem areas and you're cruising
Mm.
through the solutions. So you see and you correlate, you connect the dots, the larger picture becomes evident. Why do we bring them to the mountains? Because they need to believe in climate change. They need to believe that it is really happening. It's not something you just browse through on your social media. It's real. Come and see the water crisis. Come and see the glaciers depleting in Ladakh, in Himachal. Uh, Confront the problem and then say that, okay, is this information important to me? Do I want to work with this? Or it's all right, let somebody else take this bit of the responsibility. I'm here for the fun. I'll do the regular things. But at least you consciously choose that.
Thank you for listening to the IKIVI podcast. If you're enjoying our episodes, consider supporting us by visiting www.ikivi.com. That's IKKIVI.com. Since 2015, IKIVI has been thoughtfully curating modern fashion infused with Indian heritage, bringing you hand-picked pieces that blend tradition with contemporary elegance. Our passionate venture celebrates the vibrancy of contemporary design while preserving India's rich craftsmanship, creating stunning and ethical silhouettes you'll love. Our podcast is another passion project driven by our dedication to sharing meaningful stories. It is self-funded and will always be free to listen to. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for being here. Now let's get back to the episode. So see this the difference that is really speaking to me in terms of the type of education, the kind of education or the method of education is extremely different from what we see in the mainstream education system here in India, especially, right? The idea that you're talking about is a lot more experiential and like experiencing things while educating yourselves and then coming up with solutions and to the problems that we're seeing in our world. Whereas in regular education systems, it's more this is a problem, these are the solutions we believe you should kind of execute, and this is how you should do things. So
Yeah,
it's also very time restrictive, right? Like in an education system that already exists,
yeah,
where we're not letting the heart or the person really feel anything out of it.
yeah,
How important do you feel is the idea of experiencing things? Because I feel like now everything is so result driven and goal driven
yeah,
that this is a very like slower process, the kind of education that you're talking about.
yeah.
What do you believe is the outcome of something like that in an
Mm.
education system in as a whole, but also within the fashion industry in terms of making change? But what do you see it kind of evolving into, and what do you see as the outcome of it?
That's vast, actually. When you look at it from a bird's eye view, it gives you a lot of spheres to look at of impact. First, I think, is that, as you said, experience driven learning makes you believe in the fundamentals of how things are done, how a yarn is made, how natural indigo, is dyed onto a fiber or onto a yarn, and then you weave it together to become a fabric of a certain character. Once you witness this, once you're a part of that learning, I think it makes you believe in something at each stage that, okay, I didn't think it was that twisted, or I didn't think it was that difficult, or I didn't think it was that easy. So it makes you address everything that you're absorbing and maybe rate it inside your mind in terms of priorities. So while you're learning, you're also filtering out what really interests you as an individual. So like you said, it should not be also that it is so solution or end product driven or a result driven process that people forget who they really are in the process.
Yeah,
You're not aiming to arrive at a pair of jeans. You're not aiming to arrive
yeah,
at a natural indigo dyed shirt. You're aiming to do something more throughout while you do that. And after you've designed the product, what is the impact of that? So I think looking at a soil to soil curriculum, as we call it, the experience is what I felt needs to be as deep as possible, as enriching as possible, so that people are able to say, okay, I've learned and I've witnessed and I've participated in farming the product. I've looked at how cotton grows, what is the complications with the GMO and the BT versions of it, and what is the efficiency levels of indigenous fibers, that have been used for millennia. I have grown indigo. I know the tediousness of the process of extracting the pigment. I know how to make a vat and dye it. Okay, so once you know all of this, all the way down to the product is designed and sold to a customer, where most designers or brands would shrug off responsibility further on. I think it continues to be part of the experience of the designer or the artist, that how the product is impacting the life or everyday experience of the person who's using it. And when they decide that they've had enough or they've used it enough and they're done with it now, it's come to the end of its life cycle, or to be more bluntly speaking, the death of the product, we need to talk about that as well. When they discard it, what happens to it? If it's going to sit there for 250 years, you're directly responsible for it.
mm,
you know and if you've made it consciously that it will disappear without causing any problems, or it'll find another use, or it'll be handed down from a user to another till it really becomes non-existing, is a great way to look at a product when you design it, right? I felt that that experience can only convince people to have this approach.
I fully agree. And I love that. I love the idea of taking students through the learning process right from like step one till post use or post consumer use of a particular product. I mean, if you take them through that whole process and how long it takes and slowly go through each of those situations, it's bound to create some connect, right? At some level,
Absolutely.
you're bound to connect with that product. You're bound to connect with the processes involved in creating that product. That's so beautiful. That's such a great way of educating.
I felt that that's how it came to me, and why not actually just when you talk about it, everybody like you're finding it very exciting as a process to learn. I thought that we should look at a personal side as well. That what excites an individual, and if you can take that out of the classroom, take them out of the classroom, and put them in the middle of the mountains, put them in the middle of the desert, put them in the middle of a culturally rich people, they're going to look at life differently. They're definitely going to find some connection, either with nature or with people or with themselves. Even if
Yeah.
that happens, it's a miracle. And to have that miracle in a short span, because yes, it is about slow living, it is about slow processes, but we don't want to spend too much time on it. So we've kept our course 1 year, 3 months of engagement formally, and 3 months of mentorship that happens on the final stage of them birthing their brands. We are not looking at preparing people for jobs, because no one willingly would say, I'm okay to be a slave for from 9 to 5 at a certain price, compromising my personal time, compromising my family time, compromising real travel and dreams that I want to fulfill in life and save them for a certain future. No one willingly does that.
So when did the school begin, and what have you seen students kind of graduate and become and do?
This is very important for us because we are now approaching this year the 5 year deadline that we had put to ourselves, that we'll play it very close to the chest, and I've been doing that, literally playing it very close to the chest, that guarding this sort of the way the curriculum was brought together by all our working professionals who become our mentors, that we will take this very seriously in a small capacity and see what we can do with it. Are we able to spark something? Are we able to see lives change? Are we able to see birthing of very unique ideas? And I think it's been very positive on that. And we're very thrilled about that. So I'm happy you asked that question, because the importance sustainability and responsible design deserved was brought upon us, was forced upon us by the pandemic.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic and the lockdowns, people started to realize the things that they were not earlier paying attention to. And one of them was the impact of being a consumeristic life cycle, that we have all become as societies. Consumeristic
Yeah.
societies, when you stop or reduce the consumption, people were able to pay attention to other details, the
Yeah.
better, finer details in life. And that helped us with the realization that time is now. We should not delay the idea, or we should not wait for the right moment in the future to happen for birthing the school. So in the heart of the pandemic, on the Independence Day, 15th August 2020, I announced the school to the world. And we did find some very enthusiastic people. Our batch one and our second batch, first two batches during the pandemic, did fantastic and phenomenal work. We were ourselves amused at the same time. Very, it's like you gain a lot of confidence when you see people being able to still be productive when everything else has come to a standstill. So the
Yeah.
first two batches did fantastic, and out of those, we have some very unique ideas that have emerged from the school, or from this exposure. And I feel also because maybe our curriculum was able to tap into these individuals' personal aspirations and give them that importance rather than what kind of jobs are out there. Having done that, I think through the exposure of all these mentors and artisans and industry, that has actually given people a very, very solid ground of creating and finding something new. Like we've seen ideas emerge that are focusing on wellness and well-being through clothing. We've
Yeah.
got our community members, as we call them, working on great brands that are here to solve a problem. We have somebody who's solved the problem for women's lingerie out of a denim school. We've had somebody who's working on wool as a trans-seasonal fiber. We have somebody who's working on a seed to shelf product cycle with indigo. We have somebody who's working on the textile art domains and able to explore and express the urgency of our situation. So I think yes, the past 4 years have been definitely very encouraging, path breaking for us ourselves, and there's been a lot of learning. At the same time, sometimes I think that if there's like how many people if we will engage with, we could make a bigger impact. That is the next question we want to address. And sometimes I do think that if there is such an urgency, if your social media is showing you such an ugly side of fashion, how many people would really want to still make a difference? And that should
Yeah.
reflect in the times when we open our admissions. You know,
Yeah.
Honestly speaking, it still takes a little bit of convincing people sometimes, and if there are exceptions always, but largely you have to always still explain why being responsible, why including sustainability in your thought process is vital at this time. You
And I
have
would
to.
love to see it in not just uh, one school, but I feel like if we can see this kind of an education curriculum set up for design schools globally, I mean, not just in India, but globally, if we can see more of this as part of it, I feel there's a huge change that we can have in the industry, right? From that level, right? Because I mean, we have so many people now coming into the industry with some basic knowledge of understanding what responsible design is, but like with a proper system like this, I feel like there can be so much more change that can happen.
I strongly believe that, and I would agree with you, Nivi, because the impact can only be, and we are running against time because the
Yeah.
slower we are about this realizations, the more difficult our future is looking. And I feel that, in a such a pessimistic scenario where the world is heading, having something to work on should be fundamental to everybody in whichever stage of a career they are. To be
Yeah.
able to identify a certain problem, even in our own tiny capacities, if all individuals just contribute to, making life simpler and better, I think everybody's got a role to play. It's not just
Yeah.
about one school or certain schools or only schools. So there's got to be more engagement beyond those who come to learn as well. So we're working on certain engagements and platforms which will involve people on the street, people going to work, and yeah, maybe we need to talk more about it. I feel, and then from those who become more aware, will come the seekers who want to take it to the next stage. That yes, I want to, contribute in my own capacity to bringing about
Yeah.
some change, some positive change. And that's
Yeah.
where I feel we are going to be looking at engaging with a lot of design schools, existing design schools, because the subjects that we are talking about are, in a way, unique to Indenium. We're looking at denim and indigo very closely. We're looking at cultures and a very, 21st century way of living and making also very closely. And we are able to give that sort of an engagement to an individual where you become aware and then you make the right choice. You don't
Yeah.
make a choice first like I did, and eventually I found out that, oh, this is the most ugly side of fashion, the denim industry. I can't carry on with this. It has to become a little different. So I think, yes, everybody will aspire for some change they want to bring. And I'm sure as individuals, there are a lot of people who are fed up with the way a lot of things have been going on and want to bring about the change. And I think
Yeah.
it is up to these individuals to take that, like make that call happen and just take that path, get on going with it. It's full of challenges, but that's the fun part of it. You're
Yeah.
in charge of the work you're doing, and you are able to do it wholeheartedly. You're not doing it because someone wants you to do it. You're doing it because you love doing it. You know?
Yeah,
And I think with just that much enough, if we approach our work, a lot of difference is already happening.
I agree for sure. I have one kind of final ish question about the. See, in today's world, we have so much technological advancements that were that are becoming faster. We're able to produce a lot more quicker. But at the same time, we have all this indigenous knowledge and craft and technique and ancient wisdom that we have with us that kind of is holding us back. This is something that I passionately feel for,
Mm.
and which is why I've started Ikivi, where we're kind of blending um, these two aspects of life, modernization and as well as holding on to our traditions and all of that. How do you see that kind of playing a role in the future of the fashion industry, where we're on the one side we have to kind of adapt to technology and use technology well, but also keep true to our traditions and ancient wisdom?
That's a very significant question, Nivi, because mm, the more we think about it, the more we get into this retrospective of sorts that why did we arrive at the situation where we're at? Mhm. Metaphorically speaking, if I were to give you an example, it's almost like having invited a lot of people at a party and you don't know how quickly you can serve the snacks and then the main course to them. So you're gonna look at ways to speed up, and hence enter fast food and junk food. And you're able to feed people faster. They can simply open the paper wrapper and munch on the burger. They can have a coffee or a pre-made drink just poured out, and it starts to eventually start making people a little not so well while they're still at the party. And you've been able to scale up and speed up your operations of making the food for everybody so that no one's waiting for their drinks or their food. Everybody's well fed at the end of the party, and now they're bloating. They're all getting uncomfortable because they didn't eat right, because they didn't drink right. So the speeding up bit of the technology may actually be, a need in the past where we needed to scale up, we needed to reach out to larger audiences, and I think we've reached that threshold and may very well even crossed it. We are today purely looking at largest of the businesses. I would question that if there is anything that is driving them beyond having reached a certain scale and penetration into the markets, it must be now just greed that you want to still go further. It must be purely driven by greed, because if you were morally to question what you have created and you've reached the number of people that are already there, so that you don't now have to lie to them, lure them with discounts and sales, and tell them bullshit about 10% of your collection being sustainable. What about the 90%? And why are you still making at the numbers you're making? Now, we already know it's out there that there's enough clothing being made for the next 5 to 6 generations of all mankind. If that is the case, why should we make any single new product? So I
Yeah.
think we're looking at very fundamental but unavoidable questions as individuals, because when we look into the mirror, we're not able to lie. You have to
Yeah.
confront this. Why are you doing what you're doing? Do you enjoy doing what you're doing? And is
Yeah.
it the best way to do what you're doing?
It's almost as if it's like a mindset change. So, like fast fashion and this whole capitalist economy has really trained us in thinking fast, 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 consume, consume, consume. This is good for you and all of that. And now we're at that point where we have to change the way that we think. Like we actually need to question: is it really something that we need to consume, or is it something
Exactly.
that actually is making us happy? Which is such a huge problem, right? Like
It's
everybody
not
in the
making us
world is.
happy. Unfortunately, it's not making us happy.
It
There are
isn't.
enough
Yeah.
reports coming out saying that. The only thing it's actually helping is sales.
Yeah.
and and,
That's it.
and the ecosystem, this Mother Earth, does not function with sales as any aspect in its ecosystems. So I think
Yeah.
we're totally disillusioned by the commercial reality and looking at everything as business. I think that is a flaw in the capacity to which a human being can actually function. You know, and
Yeah.
I think we need to expand our mindsets. And like you said, how do we really get inspired if we don't look at our problems that we've created closely? Where did we
Yeah.
go wrong? Polythene and polyester were hailed as great inventions back in the late 60s, early 70s when they were created. But today, 5 decades later, they're a curse to this planet.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the technological run and rush of doing things fast, we've gone wrong. We've
Yeah.
taken shortcuts we shouldn't have. And the only way we can learn from this is from history, because there is already executed proofs of how people lived and whether their lives were spent in catastrophes or where they were experiencing blissful living. We have that in
Yeah.
the past. So when we look at processes, especially in textiles, the whole supply chain from the communities who are out there with their animals on the in the plateaus of Tibet or nomadic communities in Rajasthan and the desert of Kutch, we see that there are ways that people had designed their lives around. They understood the ecosystem so well that they planned their entire movement, their food, their diet, what they wore, all in good understanding of the ecosystem they were a part of. And we are not
Mhm.
doing that today. We're in
Yeah.
a false ecosystem which is air conditioned or heated, and we're not living truly out in nature. If we are out there, we are isolating ourselves with any connection to nature by synthetic products on our body, on our as our footwear, on our head, everywhere. If you're completely surrounding yourself with this toxic products that are actually byproducts of the oil industry, I think we are looking at very very serious and difficult times, whether it is our personal mental health or it is our personal physical health. So I think as design, as fashion, we need to go far deeper than the aesthetics. We need to go far deeper than what sells and what will sell, and stop worrying about the originality. I also see a problem when we're looking at solutions. This whole thing of getting a patent or getting something registered as my right is a very very obstructive way of looking at creativity.
Yeah.
How do you create something so intelligent and then reserve it for yourself? There must
Yeah.
be again a capitalist sitting behind that thinking. So I think we need to really broaden our spheres of thinking and spheres of impact, because unless that happens, I don't think there's going to be much left in terms of to celebrate in these
Yeah.
careers, particularly the fashion industry.
Yeah. I love that. I've loved our conversation so far, and I feel like there's been so much valuable insight that you've brought to the table in terms of the way of needing for us to, I mean, not looking at it from just like the fashion industry point of view, but looking at it from a wholesome lifestyle point of view, and really sitting with ourselves and questioning aspects of our life, and whether those certain things are actually, I think that's my biggest takeaway, is whether those things are actually personally making you happy, or is it just something that you've been told to kind of take on with your life. And I feel like these are such valuable thoughts that people need to start having and thinking about a little bit more, for us to start making change, not just in our lives but in the world around us, in the air that we breathe, and the places that we live. So thank you so much, Sukraj, for having this conversation with me. We
My
went
pleasure.
from the fashion industry to mindful living as well. But is there any like last words that you'd like to leave our listeners with? Where can they follow you? Where can we see your work online?
We are there on Instagram, Indanium School of Responsible Design. You can search for. We have a website. You can visit our website to learn more about the school. We will be very shortly opening admissions for our new batch. So I'm also here, hoping that a lot of people who've been listening to our conversations and are willing to learn and start something, very unique, truly original, and find their own path, I think they're welcome to come and have an experience at Indanium. Um, Also, I would say, choose education very, very wisely, because give a lot of thought to why you're spending a lot of your time and thought and energy, and then maybe, of course, money as well. That
Yeah.
is it really going to help you be yourself? Because I think at the bottom of everything is how you as an individual are feeling
Yeah.
about yourself and about the way you're living your life, and have those questions before you commit into education or a career, because somewhere down the line we will always find new arenas to learn and explore things that may just appear newly out of the horizons and may have a lot of interest. But I think the real difference can only be beginning at the inside of our individual hearts. Paying more attention to what we choose to do and what we choose to commit to, I think, is the way to really bring a change.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you again for having this conversation with us.
A
And I'm
pleasure.
so excited for our listeners to listen in.
Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you, Nidhi. Thank you so much.